Chris,
Hey, how are you?
I'm in constant fear when we record because uh, my cable line for my internet is literally like just run down the street in front of my house.
Does it cross over the street?
No, luckily, but like there's two. I don't know anything about utilities. That should be like if there's anything you should know about me, I know nothing about that.
So if we hear a lawnmower and then you just disappear, we know what happened.
Pretty much. So there's a box so like if you're looking at my house to the front of it, to the left, there's like a little box that I imagine is like for underground utilities. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and if you look to the right, there's another one, but neither one of them are in my house. But all I know is that one day Comcast went down. There was a Comcast truck outside. And then for the past 2 months, there's been this thick black wire that runs from box A to box B, and it's right in front of my house. So I'm pretty sure that's my Comcast connection. And then
That's
I can just go outside and
hilarious.
cut it like
Wow,
with
that's
a pair of
pretty funny.
scissors.
W-
And
I've been uh, I've been watching AT&T like make holes in the sidewalk next to my house. And there's this big new like apartment building going in there. So I'm pretty sure they paid for like AT&T to run fiber out to my house or out past my house. But every time I plug in my address online, it doesn't show that I can get fiber internet.
I have
And
the same problem.
and I'm like, man, like who can I talk to? Like, what if I just run the cable myself? Like, that'd be fine, right? So yeah, I'm like, I just want to pay for fiber. Please take my money. That's it.
Comcast will give us fiber, but like I can't just like AT&T is like pretty affordable fiber.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like $90 a month or something for 1 gig up, 1 gig down, I
yeah,
believe.
that's reasonable.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's pretty solid. Because right now I pay like the same price for 500 down and like 20 up on Charter Spectrum, which is like, not great. Not when I'm uploading videos.
yeah, I so Comcast actually does me pretty fair. They like since I've been a Comcast member, they've bumped up our speed like 150 meg. So we get like between 250 and 300 down.
That's not bad.
No, it's pretty good, but we only pay like $60 a month. But every like we do that on a yearly contract at the end of the year. It always goes up like $40. I'm like, all right, Shannon, time to call Comcast.
Yeah,
And
and
literally
pretend to cancel.
yeah, every time she calls, we get our old rate back. So
Yeah, it's really funny how they do that. And it's really crappy too at the same time.
yeah, I will say like Comcast has gotten a little better. It's still like I don't know.
Yeah.
Do people even have Comcast outside of the United States?
I don't know. It's a good
I don't
question.
know.
Probably, I would guess not, but
I would
maybe.
guess not. So only a subsection of people listening understand our woes. Uh, so today we have a guest with us. Jesus, do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Yes, hello, my name is Jesus Castello. I'm a Ruby developer from Spain, and I teach Ruby through my website, which is rubyguides.com. And I have been doing this for a few years, and I have a lot of articles in there that can help you learn Ruby from beginners to intermediate to advanced. I have something for everyone.
Cool. Thanks for joining us. Um, so when you say you teach Ruby, do you teach any like Rails content or mostly just Ruby content?
I focus mostly on Ruby, like 95% Ruby. I want to do a little more Rails because people have been asking me, can you teach some more Rails, more things like that? And I will try to introduce a bit more Rails content. But my main focus is Ruby because I really like Ruby as a language more than focusing on the frameworks.
That's fair. Uh, except we have somebody with us whose entire business is Rails screencasts.
Well,
So
I mean, it's all
and
Ruby underneath. That's
Mhm.
it, you know?
Exactly.
except for your stimulus videos
Well, yeah.
and your
It's
view videos.
all JavaScript underneath the Ruby too.
How long, Jesus, have you been teaching Ruby?
For about 3 years now.
How long have you been doing Ruby in general?
About 7 years.
Okay. Would you get started with programming originally, and then what led you into Ruby?
Yes, I started many years ago, like when I was about 9, 10 years old, and 33 now, free. So that's a lot of years. I had a computer which was a very old computer, an Amstrad 486. Amstrad 486. You can Google that if you want to see what that looks like. And it came with a manual, with a programming manual, right? So when you buy a computer today, it doesn't come with any kind of manual, maybe some manual for the motherboard, or some hardware, but it doesn't come with a programming manual, right? But by then, it came with a programming manual. I think the programming language was just called BASIC, just BASIC. At least is what it say in the cover of the manual. It was a fake manual. And then I got started with that. I just read it, and it had pages and pages and pages of code examples. And I just copy and paste basically the code. I didn't fully understand what was going on, but I find it very fascinating and very interesting and exciting that as I type this code into the computer, things start to happen and I can control what happens, right? And that really got me hooked into this whole programming thing. And then later on, so I got a better computer, an actual Intel computer with Windows, because that's what I knew, what was available to me right then. The next programming language that I learned was Perl. In fact, I still have the Perl book that I bought by then many, many years ago. After that, then I learned some Java, some C, pretty much a bit of everything, and PHP. So all of the popular languages, I learned a bit about them, even a bit of assembly language. So, and that's very interesting. And
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say I had when you mentioned Perl, when I graduated college, I'd done a little Rails and Ruby, and then I got a job doing Perl, and Perl is definitely an interesting influence in the design of Ruby. It felt like going back in time using Perl after learning Ruby, but I can see that being a good transition to go from Perl to Ruby.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was when I discovered Ruby. I just read about this whole Ruby thing on the internet, and I thought it was very interesting. So I started learning, and then I really got into Ruby, and I decided that I would make that my main programming language. And it has been kept like that since then. I really I really like Ruby because the syntax, it can be very elegant. We have things like enumerables, enumerators, and blocks, all of these nice things. I also like it's very object oriented. So all of these things I think make Ruby gems, all of that make Ruby a very nice and well-rounded programming language.
How did you get into teaching?
Right. So what happened is that I did some freelancing, and then I got tired of that, and dealing with clients, a lot of that can be very tiring, right? So I thought, else can I do that I still work with Ruby? So I look into the teaching. I started teaching. I like teaching. I really enjoy when I see other people learning and they have these aha moments when you're as they're learning and you're teaching them and guiding them, right? I really enjoy that. So I thought, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start teaching. I'm going to learn about teaching and writing articles. And I did that. I learned how to properly write some good articles, how to do research for these articles, and all of that, all of the skills that are required. And then I thought, well, I need to make a business out of this so I can actually do this all the time, right? So that's what I did. My blog, I publish free content, but I offer a subscription to my newsletter. And when you subscribe to the newsletter, then occasionally I send you offers to buy my books or any courses that I release in the future or one-on-one training with me and things like that.
That's cool. So you actually like offer people one-on-one training. Do you have a lot of people take you up on that?
Not right now because I don't offer very actively. Sure. But I had a student for a few months, and he kept going for a few months, and we meet almost daily. So that was really fun. And what I would like to do is to do, I'm not sure how to structure this. I would like to do like group sessions, group sessions, group teaching sessions. So like 7 or 8 students in like Google Hangouts or something like that live, and one mentor, teacher, and then guide them through some problems. But I'm still working out how exactly I want to do that, how to make sure that the people can meet at the same time, because since I have people, I have readers, and my audience is all over the world. It's mostly the biggest percentages is from USA, but I have also people from Spain, people from Brazil, from India, even from China, from all of the world. I know this because Google Analytics and because, of course, I speak with people that read my blog through email. People email me and I speak with them about Ruby and things like that. Yeah.
So, Chris, while we're on the subject, I don't know on this podcast that we've ever talked like, how did you get started programming and subsequently teaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. I originally started when it was like 7th grade, and my dad was taking or cleaning off a bookshelf, and he found his old Atari Basic programming book, and he gave that to me. And we didn't have an Atari. I think his mom, my grandma, had gotten rid of it or something, and so we didn't have that. But we had this old DOS computer that had GW Basic on it, and it was similar enough to the Atari Basic that I was able to learn and just copy what they were doing in the book and reproduce it, write my own line numbers and everything. It was quite different. And over time, I just kind of went and figured out like, okay, there's this QBasic thing, which is basic, but you don't have to write your own line numbers, and it has all these other features and stuff. And eventually got into doing Visual Basic and C++ and things. And then sometime in high school, I got my own computer finally. So I wanted to install Linux on it, and we had dial up. And so I decided, to basically like read through all these tutorials online and try and get Linux set up on there and all the features working, because Wi-Fi back then didn't work out of the box. So I was reading all these tutorials, and so I started to kind of aggregate people's forum threads when I'd find solutions for how to make like this feature work or whatever. and just like wrote a guide for that laptop that I had, just to organize it. And I was really active in that forum community, and other people were writing guides. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into doing similar things, and just would turn those into blog posts and things like that.
Yeah, since you mentioned about Linux, I want to mention a little story about that because I was learning getting my first computer. I mentioned I came with Windows. It was like Windows 95. Then I learned also about Linux. And the way I got my first Linux distribution was by buying a magazine, one of these magazines. And I'm sure if I'm pronouncing the word correctly. You know what I mean? The magazines, these things you buy at the kiosk, and they came with a CD.
Yeah, right. Like
With
those
Linux.
old magazines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
magazines. And it was like Red Hat 6.0. I was all excited. I'm installing that. And I found out that there wasn't a trash, like the trash bin that you have on the desktop on Windows.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that you didn't have that, so I tried to create it after installing Red Hat. I create like a folder. I name it like trash, and I tried to create my own. I tried to make it more into Windows because that's what I was used into.
Yeah, it's a hard transition to wrap your head around the difference, especially when all you've really known is Windows. To go to Linux, it's quite a different thing.
Yeah, see, when I first even thought about using Linux, I was already a Mac user. So,
that's good because then you're already kind of somewhat familiar with it since it's based off similar things.
yeah, but then, like, kind of like Jesus was saying, like, I would want to try and make it Mac, which is just not a thing.
Yeah, you end up going down the rabbit hole of customizing Linux, which takes years, and you're always fiddling with things. I feel like
My entire life is going down the rabbit hole.
I feel like at least on OS 10, I'm actually productive, whereas on Linux, I was always like fiddling with making my desktop a cube with snow and other weird like animations and stuff I didn't need.
That's like it was like when we first started the podcast. I talked about how I was like going to try Windows out for a week with like Ruby development.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then like I kept trying to like tweak it to like how I've used a Mac for so long, and I'd been doing it for like 4 hours and not written any code.
Yeah, I remember I installed Windows to do the Windows 10 Rails guide on how to install it, and I remember just installing it and then rebooting and waiting for 30 minutes for updates to install, and I was like, this hasn't changed much since I last used Windows. It's still just always updates all the time.
So, Jesus, what's some of your, like, favorite content to write? Like, what do you really enjoy writing? Any like specific Ruby things, or just all things Ruby?
Well, that's a good question. I enjoy all kinds of content, but some of my favorite is probably where I'm learning myself something new, and I have to research about it, so I can find out how it works. When I have to actually write code to prove if this works this way or that way. So I really enjoy what while I'm writing, I'm discovering something new about Ruby. That's really interesting and fun. I also like writing when we have a new Ruby feature, reading about the new features and testing them out, and just writing what's and creating the examples so people can also test these new Ruby features.
So, are you just going through like Ruby change logs and like figuring out what's new and writing about it, or how do you discover what's new between each version?
Yes, so there is the release page that gets announced on rubylang.org, and there is some news, but there is a lot of things missing. So where you can go is to the GitHub repository. On the GitHub repository, you can find the news file, and usually you will find a lot more things in there. And you can also look at the individual commits, because the news file doesn't always have everything. If you look at some commit messages, sometimes you find something like added this new method. Maybe they forgot to add it to the news file, and things like that.
Cool. You mentioned something that made me also want to punt a question to Chris too. You mentioned that like the things that you're also learning too, like when you're writing something, you're also learning things you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, how do you come up with like Go Rails episodes?
A lot of it's similar. Those are the most fun, kind of. If you haven't done something before, it's fun to research it. I also, because I'm working on Hatchbox on the side, there's a lot of complicated things I end up doing in that, and so that makes for really good ways to extract screencasts and ideas. So as long as I'm building other projects, like I used to consult or work at a company, and now I've got my own other product. So as long as I'm building something complicated, um, it usually just gives me kind of an infinite list of features to go and say, hey, that deserves a tutorial. I can go pull that out and cover that, because other people will find that interesting or whatever. So it kind of is the most common thread that I have these days, is just stuff that I'm working on that would obviously make for a good little tutorial.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like Hatchbox kind of inspires you. It's like the project you're working on outside of Go Rails that can like still ignite ideas.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you leave it and you're not doing that stuff, you just never feel like you have any good ideas, because nothing ever kind of springs to mind as like, oh, no one talks about this. I should go explain it,
Right. Hey, Sue, similar question. How do you find how do you find ideas for content to write?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have different strategies. First, I look at what people ask for. Some different Ruby communities on Facebook groups, and I keep checking from time to time to see what things keep popping up, and then I take notes about that. I have like document where I copy and paste things people ask for, so I can refer that after for ideas. Then also I'm so on Slack channels and things like that. So everywhere that I am aware that there are gatherings of people that like Ruby and talk about Ruby, I try to keep tabs on that to see what people are having struggling with or need help with. So that's one thing. Another thing is that I get emails from people, and they ask me for things. How you do this? How do you do that? So, for example, yesterday I got an email. Someone asked me for how to use Ajax in Rails. So, like I said, I don't do a lot of Rails, but that's one thing that I could do as a piece of content, right? And I have also a YouTube channel where people also post comments, and sometimes these comments are just thank you for the content and all of that. I'm thankful for people that watch and leave kind comments, but also on the channel they leave content ideas or things that they want to learn more about.
Interesting. So I was like scrolling through your blog and you have a ton of articles. How many do you try and put out a week?
It's 2 a week, so I try to post on. I got kind of on a schedule now. I was kind of random before, like 1 year ago, and now I try to get into this more consistent schedule because I think consistency is very important for anything you do, not just posting content, but anything that you want to be successful at, you need to be very consistent, right? So right now I'm this schedule where I post on Fridays and Mondays. I post a new article these days. So that will be two a week.
Chris, how much content are you putting out?
I usually post one video a week.
So do you alternate between like pro and free?
Yeah. I try and alternate, and it just depends. Sometimes I do a series that's, several of one type in a row, and then do a few free ones or something. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes, and Ryan Bates has talked about this too in the past, like that he would spend like on average like 40 hours to make one screencast, which I remember reading that being like, nah, that's insane. And yeah, it's definitely easy to spend 40 hours when you are, especially if you're doing something new. That's why a lot of my content will come from other things that I'm building, because it's all deeply understood in my head, so I can record that content faster. But if you're doing something you're not familiar with, it can easily take you that long just to go iron out all the different edge cases and stuff that you need to address and make sure you're explaining it well. And just there's a lot that goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I I lost my train of thought. I'll have to come back. What were you going to say, Jesus?
No, it's indeed a lot of work to do the research and put content together. And imagine video, it even takes you more. I also do some video, but it's not my focus. But video, I feel like it takes even more work because you have to do all of the video editing and all of that.
Yeah, so that was what I was gonna bring up too. Like, you also, Chris, like you do your videos like straight through, right? You don't usually like chop them up and put them together.
They're usually pretty edited.
Really?
I don't
like,
edit them after the fact.
Pro.
The way I do it is I record as I'm going along, and then if I end up with too many edits or whatever, I'm clearly kind of struggling. So I'll either like stop and record it the next day or something. And that way it's just more, because my goal with mine are to feel like we're pair programming. So my videos end up being either I record it, kind of edit, I'll record chunks at a time. And so then I'll make sure that those are right, because the worst thing you can possibly have is spend 30 minutes or 20 minutes going through something and find out you made several typos 5 minutes ago, and then you're like, and we can go back and fix this typo.
The whole
whatever.
ship just falls apart.
Yeah, and so those are like the things I'm trying to avoid. So recording it in chunks as I go along helps with that. But then also you can do the sort of, voiceover approach if you wanted. But I wanted mine to kind of feel more live. But I know that it works well for like all the Ruby Tapas videos are voiced over, and they seem to work out really, really well. So, there's a bunch of different ways you can go about it.
Maybe I haven't I also admit when I like go to a specific Go Rails video, it's to find like one thing I remember seeing, or like trying to like extract something I know you're talking about. But I could have sworn like when I watched them, like they were straight through. So that's impressive. And also it explains to me like when I try to record some videos and like we get to the end, I was so frustrated every time.
Oh man. Yeah, it's funny because I will record something in the morning sometimes and then just be like, annoyed the rest of the day because it'll be just frustrating to record. Or what happens every time is I'll record in the morning and then I'll be like brain dead by 10 a.m. or something, and like basically can't work for the rest of the day because I'm like, I'm so exhausted.
It's draining. I only did like 6 or 7 videos, but like I also tried to do them like all on a weekend, and like by Saturday night
Yeah.
I felt like a zombie. I haven't tried since. I should maybe try again.
Yeah, if you do that much, I mean, I go in spurts while I'm like inspired to cover something, and I'll do that. But if you do that much all in a short time, it gets real exhausting real fast.
I learned a lot more about ES6 though, because that's what my videos were on. So I learned.
Yeah, I'm excited for all the new transitions in Rails over to ES6 now that Webpacker is going to be the default.
Yeah, very very much excited. Uh, there's a lot of like, so a Rails 00 beta 2 I think came out yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah, which was like what 3 weeks late or something.
Yeah, I actually had a picture of the schedule and I lost it. It was like supposed to be it's like February 5th.
Yeah,
But
it
like
was like early.
DHH still on Twitter seemed like optimistic they can get Rails 6 on the timeline. So
Cool. Do you know
but
why it was behind?
I don't know. I really like anything I would say would be speculation, but I know so like this one came with the new Sitework uh
Yeah,
code
the
loader.
new autoloader, yeah. Which is
Uh
really interesting because the
it's
the old
super interesting.
autoloader was causing issues with some of my background jobs, and I know that that was like one of the issues that isn't noted in the Sidekick docs is like make sure that you have all of your stuff working safely with the autoloader. Otherwise, like you can get deadlocks in Sidekick jobs.
Yes, and they still so I read through the Sitework blog post because like I'm really fascinated by it. The only time I've had like auto loading trouble has been like working with Rails engines. Like you and I worked on a couple of Rails
Yeah.
engines
Yep.
together, and like I just like want to bang my head in the wall. But like, so with Sitework, or I guess now with just using Rails 6, they've removed all the instances or the need for required dependency.
Yeah, that seems like a huge improvement.
And then, but I was thinking too, like, what about projects that do that? And so, like, you can still, at least in like beta 2, and I imagine the like first release, you can still like use the old loader. It's just settings change.
Okay. So is it like if you ran code that did the required dependency, is that just going to give you like a deprecation warning now, or
I have no idea.
I'd
I wish I
imagine it
knew.
would.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm interested. Ever since they announced this, I've been interested because it seems like something that like wasn't a big pain point for me, but I know is a pain point for a lot of other people. And it seems like really nice that like this is like a step in the right direction. So
Yeah. It seemed like it was quite a complicated uh, thing to write. So no wonder it's taken so long to get this quite big improvement, it seems like.
the other thing I noticed just reading through, since we're talking Rail 6 real quick, there's it was I think mostly in the last alpha or beta, whatever's out right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Beta 2.
yeah, so in beta 1, I think it was, and some stuff in beta 2, there is a lot of action cable stuff going on.
Really? I haven't noticed any of that, but I haven't been keeping a close eye on it. What's changing in Action Cable?
So I don't know enough about Action Cable to be able to explain it, but I do know though. So do you remember Vladimir who spoke at Southeast Ruby?
Mm-hmm. I know that they integrated his test stuff, right?
Yeah. So they bake that in, and then I don't have it pulled up, but it's really fascinating to read. Once again, like I've never used Action Cable in production, so like
I use
for
it for
me, it's like
streaming on Hatchbox, streaming your logs and other things.
mm, for me, like reading through, I was like, oh, this seems like really nice, but I don't have like
Yeah,
training, so I just
there's a bunch of
literally sound like an idiot.
There's a bunch of like smaller tweaks that'll be useful in there. It looked like that were just kind of helpful methods that maybe weren't exposed publicly or whatever, but were kind of commonly needed or used, which seems like a good improvement. I'll have to read through the changelog on that and see. I was also going through a bit of action text recently. Last week, I was implementing. One thing that's kind of funny is like at mentions aren't a feature in Tricks as an editor, and it seems like a good feature to have in action text, which is
You
based
should have
on
brought that up
Tricks.
2 recordings ago.
Yeah. So I was reading through some implementations and the examples that people had written in the issues on GitHub or using Zerb Foundation's Tribute library, which is pretty good. It's just an ES6 native, basically just loads a drop down and does a little autocomplete.
Can you grab that package without like the rest of Zerb Foundation?
Yep. Yeah, it's just like, well, it's funny because if you yarn add tribute, it starts to install some like serial port node libraries, and it turns out it's like named tribute JS or something. But I like blindly was like yarn add tribute, and it was like failing to compile the C extension thing, and I was like, why would it need a C extension? And then it turns out this just named weird. So it was cool though. Like I got that working and and this is another great thing is I know we've definitely tweeted about it and talked in Slack about this, but Basecamp recently made the change too for themselves and for Rails 6 to have source maps on by default. So in your browser, you can read the actual JavaScript that was written, not the compiled version.
Right.
So one of my things was to figure out, well, there's these examples using tribute to do at mentions in text. In the tricks example or GitHub issues, but how does Basecamp do it? So I went through and poked around their JavaScript and saw, how they do at mentions, and theirs is more complicated because theirs works across tricks and their chat and something else too, maybe their search. So their implementation's more complicated, but it's cool to see that and be able to go read how they're doing things and kind of see how you might apply those ideas to your code too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before we wrap up, I have 2 more questions. The first is, I know we kind of shifted it off topic here, so I'm going to try and shift this back a little bit. You both mentioned consulting as a thing that you did or do. Jesus, do you still do any consulting?
No, not anymore.
Okay, so it kind of was like the middle step between getting you from point A to point B.
Yes.
Then I will save those questions for another time. My last question is: you have an article on which Ruby IDE you should use, and I'm curious. I haven't read through it, but which one do you use?
I use Atom.
So the reason I ask, Chris, I know you're a Vim user. Do you use like Mac Vim or just?
I use Mac Vim most of the time, and then I use Vim in the terminal on over SSH and stuff. And that's one of the big reasons why I picked Vim was
Makes sense.
It's commonly installed on Linux servers, so if I can use the same editor here and there, it's really really easy. So yeah.
So the reason I'm asking these questions, I spent a lot of time this weekend like tweaking VS Code for Ruby because they did like a pretty like, so there's a Ruby plugin that like somebody else runs. Also, my kids are coming in and they're very loud. And
so you
got it set up to do like, so there was like I used Rubocop for linting, but this weekend I messed with standard RB. Have either one of you heard of standard?
Mm-mm.
So it's a project from Test Double, which is
Okay.
a company, and they are a consultancy, and it is like a highly pre-configured RuboCop that does auto correcting based off that file, and it's awesome. I know that like there was like there was a lot of debate around like certain styles like online and stuff, but like I'm not using it at work because I don't want to piss off my coworkers. But like I just run like format document and like I don't have to think about any styling in Ruby. It's so awesome.
That's interesting. I'll have to check it out. What other Ruby and Rails plugins do you use in VS Code?
I use one that formats ERB for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I can just write nasty ERB and hit save and it looks all good. I use Prettier JS for my JavaScript. These are all formatting things I know, so shame on me. But other than that, I have one that if you're using RSpec, I have like it's a plugin. I have command setups where I can be like Command L and it'll run that test line. Or I could be like Command Shift T and it'll run the entire test file. But the cool thing is, like, if I'm actually in the model and I run that command, it knows to go find the matching spec.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then the other one I use is I have one that this is so silly. It auto completes blocks for me. So like if I type do, it types end because I just got tired of typing in so much.
Yeah, those are handy. Those are handy until then you like what was it? Sometimes when you do those, like, you like have to then go and move your cursor around when you want to go past the ending there, and I usually found that annoying in HTML. Whereas, like,
Yeah.
I just want to be able to continue typing and close
So
the tag.
this one drops an end and then puts you 2 spaces into the method definition.
Nice, that's handy.
Or whatever you're doing. So like, it also works for like defining methods. And the other one I use is I have 2 more. Man, I am loaded here. Rails partial, so I can select some ERB and then run a command and tell it where I want it to go, and it'll make it a partial.
Oh, that's cool.
And automatically like drop out a render block. And then the last one that I use is I can run. It's called Rails FastNav, I think is what this one gives me. I do like Option R on a Mac, and if I'm in a model, it'll tell me all the related like files to it. So like it's an easy way to like hop to the spec file. I think it'll maybe even like give you controllers that could be related, but I could just be making that up.
That's pretty neat. You'll have to post some links to those. I might try it out just to see how far it's come these days. I'm still probably going to use Vim, but it's definitely nice to have that graphical editor sometimes. Especially if you're working with other people who might be using VS Code or whatever, because they have I know Adam has that teletype support where you can remotely edit together. Does VS Code have a similar thing?
It might. If it does, I don't know.
If not, you just use Tuple.
Yeah. Mostly I just like share my screen and I'm like, look at all the mistakes I'm making.
Fair enough.
Have you tried the SolarGraph plugin?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Do you use that with Adam?
No, but I have tried it with VS Code when I was testing VS Code.
Yeah, so SolarGraph is a language server. Like you install it as a gem for those who don't know, and it's like gem install SolarGraph. I probably pronounced it wrong. But with VS Code, it will give you IntelliSense code completion and like inline documentation. I literally just read that from the plugin description. But it's cool because like I can open up an array of like numbers and then hit dot and it'll tell me all the methods available that like it can gather. Or like if I type out a method, okay, so like essentially it'll do everything that it'll do a lot of things that you get with statically typed languages as far as text editor. So I can hover over a class name and it'll try and find it. And if that class has documentation or even just a comment at the top, it will without me having to go to the definition, it'll tell me what that class does. It's really cool.
I actually report a book to Solargraph and it got fixed.
Oh, cool. What was the bug?
I don't remember. Oh, yes. It had something to do with class names. So if there is a class name which is 2 words, like object space, right? It's 2 words, object and space. Then it thought, the plugin thought that, was thinking that the real class name was space, not object space. And that happened because there was some regular expression that was not chopping the class name correctly.
Well, thanks for fixing that. Because there's been a couple of times too, I've gone, so if I use a Rails generator, or I make a new file and the class name doesn't match the file name, it immediately is we have blown up and you have to restart, fix this and restart. So it's a little I don't know the word I'm looking for, but I really enjoy using it. I think with how good it is already, and maybe it's been around a lot longer than I think it has, I'm really excited to see long term how to use it, because it I've talked about on here before how I wish I had more help from my editor.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever use the built-in debugger in VS Code?
So I actually tried to use it this weekend, and I didn't love it. So I did there were a couple of cool things you could do, when you get to you set a breakpoint when you get there, it shows you defined variables and things like that, which I really liked that. I'm just so used to binding.pry that I wasn't ready to break up with it yet.
Okay, so that's what you use normally for. What's your debugging process like? So you find your code isn't working and you don't know, you have no idea why. Where do you get started normally?
So for me, I will look at the logs and try and figure out where it blew up. And then I will drop a price statement in there and rerun the code, and then just kind of poke around. And that's how I get started. And it is actually how I kind of I'll take that through the whole process. So if I realize it's actually another method that broke it, then I will pull the price statement out, take it over there. It's a little similar to Aaron Patterson has an article called I'm a puts debugger. And it's a little similar to that, except I'm actually prying in while I'm there.
Yeah,
You're a pry debugger.
Yes. So what do either of you have a different debugging process? I'd be curious to hear.
I pretty much do exactly that. I will just drop. Usually, I use just bybug since it's built in. But yeah, I'll just go drop that in wherever and poke around and just rerun. I'll check the variables, make sure they are what I expect, and then just kind of rerun each line of code. I'll put it before the bug happens, and then rerun each line of code and see if I can figure out what was causing the issue and not being passed in correctly or something like that. But 99% of the time that's all I end up doing, and it gets me to the right spot, just checking the stack trace and figuring out where I should start with that, and just verify that everything's correct. Usually as soon as I find the variable that isn't what I expected to be, then I'm like, oh, that's not right, and then I know where to go look.
Isn't there some kind of built-in thing into Ruby now that does something like this?
I'm not sure.
I'll have to look it up. I'm pretty sure.
There is gem for typos. So when you make a typo on a method name, it will try to correct you, and it will say, "Did you mean da da da?" In fact, it's a gem that's called "Did you mean?" And it's included by default since Ruby 2.3 or 2.4. And that's the closer thing to what you're saying that I'm aware of.
So it looks like there's a thing you can do binding.irb.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I guess that's what I'm thinking of. I guess that's only in a REPL.
That's similar to binding.pry then.
Yeah,
but just takes the current because I forget what all you can access like the method that called you and all those other things with a few variables that are available in every method or whatever, and binding's one of them. And that's how like the web console and the better errors gem, when in Rails you like hit an error and they give you a command prompt. That's how those work. They actually like remember the binding and keep track of that, so you can click on any one of those lines of code in your stack trace and then go inspect the variables in any of those, which is like one of the best features. It's so handy to have that, because I will usually click on the different stuff and then see the source code inside of Rails or whatever gem it crashed in, and then poke around and see what they're trying to do internally with that prompt there.
What about you, Jesus? Any different debugging style, or kind of the same as both of us?
It's about the same, but sometimes I use P, the P method, which is like puts inspect, that allows you to see the values. What you can do is see multiple values with P. So P takes a hash. A lot of people don't know this, but you can print more than one value with P. And sometimes I do P, and let's say that I have three values, A, B, C, just for simplicity. So I do P, then space A, colon A, comma, B, colon B, comma, C, colon C. And what this does is it prints a nice little hash with these three values. So I can see the three values at the same time. So that's what I do sometimes instead of finding the price. It depends a bit on the context that I'm working on.
Nice. Well, I think this is a good place for us to wrap up. Jesus, where can people find you online?
Yeah, people can find me on my website, and that's rubyguides.com. Rubyguides.com is all together, so there is no dashes or anything like that. It's just rubyguides.com. And that's my main site where you find all of my tutorials. They are free. You get access to my newsletter. There's a big button that says, yes, I want to learn more Ruby. And that gets you a little form that you can sign up to my newsletter. And you can also find me on Twitter. The name that there is MatuGM. So that's AIM ATUGM. It's the same for GitHub. And then I'm also on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel with Ruby tutorials. My channel name, I think it's just my name. So it's all together. So Jesus Castello.
Great. I really appreciate you joining us today and sharing about what you got going on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Chris.
we're glad to have you.
Chris, you got anything?
Oh, nothing that I can think of.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. Do it again next time.
All right. See ya.